Now let's have a discussion related to the sixth chapter of volume 2 titled Sustainable Development and Climate Change. This particular chapter has got certain relevant information on the subjects of environment and ecology. And in case of UPSC prelims as well as mains, there's a lot of weightage given to these particular concepts. But in the survey, certain information has been provided. You must be updating this particular information with the current affairs events. Now, what information has been provided in the survey? First and foremost, the survey makes a note that 2019 has marked the 4th anniversary of adoption of SDGs, that is Sustainable Development Goal for the year 2030, and also Paris Climate Agreement. Apart from this, the survey also makes a note that in the recent times, Government of India has implemented a lot of reforms to integrate the concept of a sustainability into the economic development. Because please understand, while achieving the objectives of economic growth, there would be certain damage that is caused to environment. And in this particular regard, the government in recent times has implemented reforms such as electrification of the households, consumption of the renewable energy, addition to the potential of capacity generation of renewable energy, so on and so forth, in order to ensure that along with the growth, we are also going to achieve the sustainable development. In this particular regard, very recently, Niti Aayog has come out with a report. That is Niti Aayog SDG Index. Now, before looking at the rankings, some of the very important points. This is a second edition of such a report that has been published by Niti Aayog. This particular report was for the first time published in the year 2018, and in the year 2019, second time it was published. But more importantly, it evaluates the performance of the states with respect to implementation of these particular goals under the sustainable development. In the first report, we basically considered the performance of the states under 13 parameters, but in the second round of report, we have expanded this particular number from 13 to 16 as per the performance. The rankings of these particular states have been provided by Niti Aayog. The best performing states under this particular index are Kerala, Himachal, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, so on and so forth. And the worst performing or the bottom performing states are Bihar, Jharkhand, Arunachal, Meghalaya, UP, and Assam. So based on the performance of the states, these particular rankings have been provided. Not only this, you must also understand that Niti Aayog points out that India's overall performance has improved from 57 points under this particular index to 60 points under the index. And the improvement under this particular index has been found in areas such as sanitation, water, power, and industry. And not only this, the report also makes a note that none of the states in case of India have fallen into a particular category which has been referred to as an aspirant category. Now, what is this concept of an aspirant category? Please remember this. Sometimes the question in UPSC will be asked on these particular parameters. That is, based on the performance of the states, certain numbers or marks are allocated. And based on the marks that are scored by the states are classified under 4 categories. These are aspirant, performer, front runner, and achiever. If a particular state scores up to 49, that is from 0 to 49, it will be classified as an aspirant state category. Second, if the state scores 50 to 64, then it will be kept under performer category. If the state scores, it will be kept under front runner category. And if the state scores 100, then it will be kept under achiever category. So the Niti Aayog report makes a note that none of the states in India have fallen into aspirant category. All the states have scored at least 50 marks under this particular index. Apart from this, there is also a discussion related to SDG Nexus. The SDG Nexus basically discusses the point wherein there is a correlation or a nexus between the targets as well as the SDGs. For example, they have discussed 2 concepts of nexus, that is between education and electricity as well as health and energy. Before I discuss these 2 points, please understand, one of the earlier economic survey also had mentioned this kind of a nexus between various targets. For example, that discussed the correlation between education and energy. Many of the households in case of India are dependent on burning of the firewood. And in case of the rural households, it has been found that the children are forced or are asked to collect the firewood for burning purposes, which is used for cooking. Now, as per earlier economic survey, annually these particular children are spending more than 400 hours to collect the firewood. And the time that is spent by these particular children in collection of the firewood is the time not spent by these particular children in studying, in going to schools, so on and so forth. So the survey earlier had recommended that we must be able to provide energy availability to these particular households, or provide the access to energy for these particular households, so that the dependency on burning of the firewood will come down. And when dependency on the firewood will come down, the children being asked to collect firewood will also come down. These particular children will be going to schools, as a result of which the literacy level, learning level was expected to increase. So these kind of nexus was earlier mentioned by the economic survey. In this year's economic survey, what kind of a nexus has been provided? The nexus has been provided in terms of education and electricity, in terms of health and energy. Let me start with the first one, education and electricity. The survey mentions three very important points. One, globally, those particular schools which have got access to electricity are the same schools which are performing better. Now, when I say performing better, it is compared to those particular schools which do not have access to electricity. Second, those particular states which have very low rates of literacy are the same states where the access to electricity is lesser. And third, the survey says that with increased access to electricity, the utilization of modern tools as well as equipments in the schools will increase. And when the access to these kind of modern tools in the education sector will increase, the literacy rates are expected to increase. So there is a very close relationship between the education as well as electricity. Second, health and energy. In case of this particular nexus, the survey provides two very important points. One, the survey says that in order to provide many of the services, such as emergency services to take care of the child, there is a need to get access to electricity. And second, there is a very close relationship between the reduction in the infant mortality rate and increased access to electricity or energy. So these are the 2 points which have been mentioned to provide a nexus, or to prove that there is a nexus between health as well as energy. Next, in terms of the climate change, the survey has provided certain points. First, it has mentioned that Government of India has submitted the nationally determined contributions. Under the NDC, Government of India has stated that first, it will be reducing its emission intensity level, and the numbers that have been provided are the emission intensity will be reduced by 33 to 35% by 2030 compared to its 2005 level. That is the first NDC. Second, it will be creating a carbon sink equivalent to 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2. And third, 40% of electricity capacity will be through non-fossil fuel sources. These are the three very important nationally determined contributions that has been submitted by Government of India. Now, with respect to this, what has been the progress done? First and foremost, all the urban areas of 35 states as well as union territories have become open defecation free. The waste processing has increased from 18% in the year 2014 to 60%. Second, of the targeted 175 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity, which Government of India has kept a target of creating by 2022, India has already achieved 83 gigawatts. The Prime Minister very recently has announced that India will not only be creating the capacity or will not be reaching the renewable energy capacity of 175 gigawatts, India will further go on and create a capacity of more than 450 gigawatts of renewable energy electricity. Third, the emission has been reduced by 21% over the period of 2005 to 2014. So these three are the progress or the achievements of Government of India under these particular NDCs. Next, certain policies which have been mentioned are: one, NAPCC and the second one is CCAP. NAPCC stands for National Action Plan on Climate Change. This was launched in the year 2008. Government of India under this particular NAPCC has launched 8 missions, and in regard to these particular 8 missions, Government of India has decided to revise these particular 8 missions so as to ensure that these particular missions are in line with SDGs. Now next one, CCAP stands for Climate Change Action Plan. This particular CCAP was launched by Government of India in the year 2014. Under this concept of a CCAP, Government of India has set certain objectives. These particular objectives are basically 1. To build capacity at center as well as the state level to assess the changes happening in the climate. Second, to establish appropriate institutional framework. And third one is implementation of the climate action. These are the objectives which Government of India has set up under CCAP, has been launched in the year 2014, and this is applicable for a period of 5 years. Next, what are the initiatives that have been taken by government at the global level? First one is ISA, International Solar Alliance. Second one is CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. With respect to ISA, some of the very important points are, first and foremost, this is the first treaty-based intergovernmental organization which is headquartered in India. The headquarters of this particular ISA is based in Gurugram. Second point is presently it has 83 signatories. Third one, under this particular ISA, it is expected that it will increase the demand from the member countries with regards to solar generation, storage technologies, etc. Next, very important point. It has set up a target of mobilizing $100 billion by 2030. These are the points related to ISA. Next, with respect to CDRI, first, India has launched this particular CDRI on the sidelines of CAS, Climate Action Summit, which was conducted in September 2019. Second, it has an international partnership of national governments, UN agencies, multilateral development banks, private sector, etc. Third, it will promote sustainable development. So these are some of the points related to ISA and CDRI. So this is the gist of some of the very important points which have been mentioned under this particular chapter of Economic Survey. Now let's have a discussion related to the points given in the 7th chapter of Economic Survey Volume 2. The 7th chapter is on agriculture and food management. First and foremost, agriculture sector is one of the most important sectors for Indian economy. For it provides huge amount of employment generation. Agriculture sector is one of the biggest employers in the Indian economy. Second, a large number of households are directly dependent on the incomes that are generated in the agriculture sector. A large population which is actually working is either directly working in the agriculture sector or is getting employment in the indirect sector that is associated with the agriculture sector or the allied sectors related to agriculture sector. Apart from this, agriculture sector contributes around 1/6 to GDP, and this particular sector also contributes to a large number of exports that are going from Indian economy to the rest of the world. So these are some of the very important points that signify the importance of the agriculture sector in the Indian context. The survey makes a note that the share of agriculture and allied sectors in the gross value addition, that is GVA, has declined from 18.2% for the year 14-15 to 16.5% for the financial year 19 and 20. But please understand, this particular decline has happened for a simple reason. One, the GDP value has increased. Second, the contribution of other sectors to the GDP has increased, or the contribution of other sectors, secondary as well as a tertiary sector, in the form of a GVA has increased. And since the percentage contribution has increased, the percentage contribution from the agriculture sector to GVA is coming down. So this is the first point. The GVA contribution has come down from 18.2% for the financial year 15 to 16.5% for the financial year 20. Second, GCF, gross capital formation. The gross capital formation in the agriculture and allied sectors has been fluctuating from 16.5% for the financial year 13 to 15.2% for the financial year 18. Now, please understand, gross capital formation is one of the very important indicators that represents how much is the investment as a percentage of GDP that is happening in various sectors. So this particular representation of investment, that is the proxy of investment, is usually given in the form of a gross capital formation. So gross capital formation is varying between 6.5% to 15.2% between financial year 13 to financial year 18. These are the basic points which are representing the overview of agriculture sector for Indian economy. Now, let's enter into some of the segments of the agriculture sector. First and foremost, the survey mentions the concept of MSP, minimum support price. As already mentioned, minimum support price is a price which is paid by the government to the farmers when they procure the food grains. The Government of India, or to be more precise, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, announces MSP for 23 agriculture commodities. Some of the newspapers will quote it as a 25, some will quote it as a 24, but Economic Survey mentions it as a 23. Even the website of a CACP, Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices, mentions it as 23 agriculture commodities. So let's go with this number. So CACP will give recommendation of a MSP to Government of India or Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. And the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs decides what will be the MSP for these particular commodities. Apart from these particular MSP which is announced by the central government, some of the states also announce a bonus. So the bonus will be paid to the cultivators who will sell the produce to the government above and over the MSP which is provided by the central government. Although for 23 agriculture commodities we announce MSP, the procurement of the central government is always focused on two very important commodities, that is rice and wheat. Because government basically needs to run the public distribution systems, around 40 to 50% of the crop, that is rice as well as wheat in the market, is procured and stored by the Government of India itself. And the MSP that is announced by the government in the last couple of years is based on the concept of cost of production. That is, the Government of India has announced MSP that will be announced will be 150% of a cost of production. These are some of the points which have been provided in terms of MSP. Apart from this, the survey also makes a mention of PM Kisan scheme, that is Pradhana Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Under this particular scheme, farmers or the cultivators will be provided with the income support of 6,000 rupees per annum. Although I am writing 6,000 rupees per annum, please understand this particular 6,000 rupees will not be given to the farmers in a lump sum amount. Rather, it will be broken down into 3 equal installments. That is, one installment, the farmer will be getting a cash income support of 2,000 rupees from the government. This particular scheme has been mentioned. Please make a note of it. Apart from this, the Economic Survey also makes a mention of a Kalia scheme and some other schemes such as Raitu Bandhu scheme of Telangana, so on and so forth. So these are some of the points that have been mentioned in the survey. Next, there is also mention of mechanization in the agriculture sector. Mechanization in simple terms refers to what extent are we utilizing the mechanical tools in the cultivation of commodities, or in the process of producing these particular commodities, what kind of tools are actually utilized. Because if the mechanization is increasing, it also means the productivity in the agriculture sector is also increasing. And when the mechanization increases, we also expect the earnings of the farmers to increase, capital formation in the agriculture sector to increase, the expenditure in the form of labor to decrease. In case of India, the mechanization levels are somewhere in the range of around 40%. Compared to India, Western economies and developed economies have better mechanization levels in the agriculture sector. In case of USA, mechanization levels are more than 95%. In case of Western Europe, mechanization levels are more than 95%. And since mechanization levels are higher in case of these particular economies, the human labor usage is lesser in these particular economies. These economies typically use around 2 to 3% of the labor for the agriculture sector, whereas a substantial part of the labor in case of India is consumed by the agriculture sector itself. So what is expected is with higher mechanization, the labor utilization will also come down. So these are some of the points. Apart from this, the survey also makes a mention that the mechanization level in case of India has been increasing at a compounded annual growth rate of around 7.5% in the time period between 2015 to 2018. And the government of India has taken certain measures as a result of which the mechanization in the agriculture sector is increasing. One reform that has been mentioned or one scheme that has been mentioned is the submission on agriculture mechanization. Government of India has launched this particular submission on agriculture mechanization in the financial year 15. And under this particular submission on agriculture mechanization, the objectives are: one, to promote utilization of the mechanical tools in the agriculture sector, to support the states or in order to promote mechanization, the central government which will help these particular states in imparting training as well as demonstration of these particular machineries to farmers. The scheme also envisages providing financial assistance to the farmers in order to procure these particular mechanical tools. The government also ensures a provision related to setting up of custom hiring centers. This particular concept of a custom hiring centers is being promoted, under which rather than asking the farmers to purchase these particular mechanical tools, these particular mechanical tools will be given on lease to the farmers. And when the farmers can utilize these particular tools at a very lower cost or on lease basis, the cost of production for the farmers will come down. They will be able to get access to latest technology or better equipments using which they can cultivate more. Agriculture mechanization will increase, productivity will increase, earnings of the farmers will also increase. So these are some of the points given with respect to mechanization. Next, there are certain points given with respect to micro irrigation. In case of India, a huge amount of a cultivable land, that is around 52% of the cultivable land, is directly dependent on the rainfall, that is monsoon rainfall. Around 48% of the land practices irrigation in India. Within this particular land, a small proportion of the cultivable fields are dependent on or are practicing the concept of a micro irrigation. Irrigation in simple terms is nothing but the application of water. In case of irrigation, there are two practices which are observed. One is a traditional irrigation methodology and the second one is the micro irrigation methodologies. Traditional irrigation, the best example is a flood irrigation. And a large amount of agriculture fields in India basically practice the flood irrigation methodology. Government of India has been promoting the utilization of the micro irrigation methodologies such as sprinkler irrigation and drip irrigation. As per various surveys, around 69.5 million hectares of cultivable land in India has the potential to be covered under the micro irrigation. And to ensure that this much amount of the land is covered under the micro irrigation methodologies, Government of India launched Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, PMKSY. Under this particular concept of a Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, the objective is to cover more and more land under irrigation, specifically under the micro irrigation. And the central theme of this particular Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana is per drop more crop should be cultivated. The objective of promoting micro irrigation is that the farmer will be able to obtain large number of benefits if they follow the concept of a micro irrigation. As per the survey, if we shift to micro irrigation, saving of irrigation water will be between 20% to 48%. Now, what is the meaning of this? Please understand, when we follow the traditional irrigation methodologies such as flood irrigation, what we basically do is we'll basically flood the whole field that is used for cultivation. And when we flood the whole field, the utilization of water will be much higher compared to when we utilize the micro irrigation methodology such as, let's say, drip irrigation, where we'll be supplying water to the plants directly with the utilization of black color pipes. So basically, the micro irrigation methodology utilization will reduce the utilization of water or consumption of water. In what extent? Between 20% to 48% water savings will be done. Second, energy saving will be between 10% to 17%. Under the flood irrigation, we will have to pump the water. Using the electrical pumps, we will have to supply the water to the whole field as such. So electricity consumption will be much higher in case of flood irrigation. But if I shift from flood irrigation to micro irrigation, the consumption of electricity will be coming down in the range of 10% to 17%. Third one, the labor cost is also expected to come down by 30 to 40%. Fertilizers consumption is going to come down between 11% to 19%. The crop production is expected to increase by 20% to 38%. Increase in the net annual income of the farmers can also be obtained if the farmers can shift to the micro irrigation practices. So these are some of the points which have been provided in the economic survey in favor of promoting the concept of micro irrigation. Next, it discusses the concept of a crop insurance. Please understand, one of the biggest issues with respect to the earnings of the farmers or the remunerative prices of the farmers is the uncertainty about the weather, uncertainty about the rainfall, uncertainty about the market prices, so on and so forth. The government of India, in order to at least control one factor which is going to affect the earnings of the farmer, has introduced the concept of a crop insurance. Earlier we had a National Agriculture Insurance Scheme. Today we have a weather-based crop insurance scheme. But these particular insurance schemes, except the weather-based crop insurance schemes, has been replaced by one particular scheme which has been introduced by Government of India, that is the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Under this particular Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the most important feature is the premium that will be paid by the farmer will be the lowest. In the earlier crop insurance schemes such as the NAIS as well as the MNAIS, the insurance premium that was paid by the farmer was much higher, usually in the range of 5% to 12.5%. But under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, Government of India has mandated that whatever be the coverage, the farmer needs to pay only 2% of this particular coverage, 1.5% of this particular coverage sort, and 5% of the coverage sort in the form of premium. Having said so, please understand that is in case of a kharif crop, the farmer needs to pay only 2% of the coverage sort in the form of insurance premium. This particular insurance premium payment will be further reduced to 1.5% if it is a rabi crop. It will be 5% in case the crop is an horticulture crop or a commercial crop. This will be the lowest premium that is paid by the farmer compared to the earlier insurance schemes. Apart from this, if the farmer is going to pay only 2%, what if the actuarial premium, that is the premium that is supposed to be paid by the farmer, is higher than this particular amount paid by the farmer in the form of insurance premium? That is, the Government of India says, let's say hypothetically, the farmer is supposed to pay 100 rupees in the form of insurance premium. But considering the value of 2% of the coverage amount, what if the farmer needs to pay only 20 rupees? There's a difference between the actuarial premium as well as the premium that is paid by the farmer. This particular difference in the premium will be paid by the central government as well as the state government, wherein the difference amount, that is 80 rupees, will be equally shared between the central government as well as the states. So under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the insurance premium that is paid is the lowest and the burden on the farmers is also lowest. Apart from this, the Government of India also has a target of covering 50% of the agriculture fields under the concept of a Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Government also wants to ensure utilization of technology under the Yojana. Government has increased the coverage of the post-harvest losses under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. So these are some of the very important features related to this particular crop insurance scheme. Now the survey mentions that certain amendments or certain changes have been introduced by Government of India to this particular scheme. That is, earlier it was seen that because of certain issues, the farmers were unable to get their insurance amount on time. As a result of this, Government of India has made or introduced two very important changes which have been listed in the economic survey. First, if there is a delay in providing the insurance coverage to the farmer because the state government has not paid its part of the subsidy, that is insurance premium subsidy, on time or before the cut-off date, then the state government has to pay 12% interest rate for the delay it has been caused. Second, if the insurance company has received the premium but it has delayed making the payment to the farmers beyond certain cut-off date, even then the insurance company will have to pay an interest rate of 12% for the delay that it has caused. So these two important changes have been introduced by Government of India under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Now the question is, what is the importance of these particular changes which has been introduced by the government? Please understand, Government of India introduced this particular scheme and put an objective or a target of increasing the coverage from 23% of the gross cropped area to 50% of the gross cropped area. Though the provisions of this particular scheme are very beneficial for the farmers, in the recent times, the total number of beneficiaries under this particular scheme or the total number of people who are under the scheme is actually coming down. One of the reasons that has been quoted by various farmers for them not choosing this particular insurance scheme has been that there is a delay in providing the insurance coverage for these particular farmers. And to counter this particular narrative or to ensure that the farmers will be given the insurance coverage within the right amount of a time, Government of India has introduced these particular measures. Next, there are certain points given with respect to agriculture trade. India exports the agriculture commodities and the total exports from India to the international market account for around 2.15% of the global agriculture trade. India exports majorly these particular commodities to countries such as Saudi Arabia, Nepal, Bangladesh, USA, etc. Apart from this, in the recent times, Government of India has taken huge number of measures in order to promote these particular agriculture exports. Some of the listed reforms are: one, the Government of India has increased the rewards that it is providing to the exporters under the MEIS scheme of the Foreign Trade Policy 2015 and 2020. Now, what is this idea for MEIS? MEIS stands for Merchandise Exports from India Scheme. Please understand, under the Foreign Trade Policy 2015-2020, Government of India basically took all the export incentive schemes for goods or the merchandises and clubbed these particular schemes under one head called as MEIS. It did the same with respect to the schemes to promote services exports also. So the scheme that was introduced to promote merchandise exports was named as MEIS and SEIS in case of services. MEIS stands for Merchandise Exports from India Scheme. SEIS stands for Service Exports from India Scheme. Under this particular concept of MEIS, if notified commodities are exported to notified markets, certain incentives will be provided in the form of duty credit scrips. And these particular incentives or the subsidies has been increased for agriculture commodities under the foreign trade policy. That is the first very important reform. Second, government every now and then has been imposing certain import duties in order to ensure these particular imports will not harm the domestic market, such as Government of India has imposed or increased the import duties on tur, has increased the import duties on peas, on gram, lentils, etc. So by imposing these kind of import duty, the Government of India is ensuring the imports or cheaper imports will not harm the domestic market. Apart from this, Government of India has also imposed certain quantitative restrictions with respect to agriculture imports as well as agriculture exports. The exports of pulses are being allowed now. In fact, Government of India is promoting the exports of pulses. Restriction on exports of edible oils have been taken off. Government also has proposed agriculture export policy using which they want to promote more and more agriculture trade, specifically promote exports from the domestic market to the international market. Next, certain very important points have been provided with respect to food processing sector. First and foremost, please understand the food processing levels in case of India are very, very less. We need to promote more and more food processing. Government of India in the last couple of years, or to be more precise, in the last decade itself, has taken a lot of measures in order to promote food processing in India. Now, what are the advantages of food processing? One, food processing promotion or higher food processing will reduce food wastages. Lot of reports have basically put a highlight on what is the amount of food wastages that are done in case of India. For example, one of the reports by Ministry of Agriculture itself states that the total value of agriculture food grains or the total value of wastages in the agriculture sector is to the tune of around 92,000 crore rupees. And it is higher than the total production that is done in Britain. So we need to promote the idea for food processing. So one very important outcome will be what? The food wastages will be reduced. Second, this particular sector is very much labor intensive. It creates huge amount of labor opportunities. As per annual survey of industries, more than 18 lakh people are employed in this particular sector. Third, it will promote diversification of agriculture cultivation, or in simple terms, cultivation of various commodities will be promoted under this particular concept of food processing. Fourth, it is going to promote agriculture trade, that is more and more agriculture exports from the domestic market to the international market. Fifth, it is going to promote formalization of various units which are set up in this particular sector. Sixth, it is going to contribute to GVA as well as GDP. Seventh, it is going to promote value addition. And most importantly, eighth, it is going to provide better returns to farmers. So these are some of the outcomes of promotion of food processing sector. So in the last couple of years, Government of India has taken a lot of measures. One very important measure has been mentioned in the economic survey, that is Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana. Under this particular scheme, Government of India has allocated 6,000 crore rupees for a 5-year period, that is between 2016 to 2020. It will provide subsidy-based support for creation of agri-based industries along the entire value supply chain. Third, the components of Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana are Mega Food Park Scheme, Integrated Cold Chain and Value Addition Infrastructure, Creation and Expansion of Food Processing and Expansion of Food Processing, Preservation Capacities, etc. So these are some of the very important points mentioned in the survey with respect to food processing sector. Next, certain very important points that are discussed with respect to fertilizers. Two very important points. One is a new urea policy of 2015 and the second one is a direct benefit transfer. The objective of new urea policy is to promote more and more production of urea in the domestic market itself. Under this particular policy, we also promote more production of a neem coated urea. Certain percentage of the total urea that is produced by the domestic companies should be produced in the form of a neem coated urea, so that this particular neem coated urea can be utilized only for the purposes of agriculture sector. Apart from this, under the new urea policy, the government will also regulate or will fix the prices for both 50 kg bag of neem coated urea as well as a non-neem coated urea. Apart from this, the government through this particular new urea policy also tried to rationalize the subsidy burden for the government of India. These are some of the very important points related to new urea policy 2015. What about the direct benefit transfer? Another concept of a direct benefit transfer, the government has introduced a new mechanism wherein the subsidy related to fertilizer will be paid to the producers only when the fertilizer is purchased by the farmer in the market. Earlier, the process which was followed was, here is the producer of fertilizer, he will produce and put these particular bags into a truck and the truck will start moving towards, let's say, a village. Now this particular producer of fertilizer will approach the respective official, submit the report and will receive the subsidy on this particular fertilizer. Now what is the guarantee that this particular fertilizer which has been dispatched by the producer will be used for agriculture purposes only? It could be diverted, it could be used and sold in the black market also, it could be smuggled into various states also. So there was a problem with respect to this particular subsidy regime in the earlier time. Now what Government of India has introduced is the concept of a direct benefit transfer in case of fertilizer. It is slightly different compared to what mechanism is followed under the LPG subsidy. Please understand, as per the DBT scheme in case of fertilizer sector, this is what will be practiced. First, the producer of fertilizer will produce the fertilizer, load them onto the trucks and will dispatch these particular trucks to, let's say, village. Now once these particular fertilizer bags will reach the villages, we are going to use a system wherein these particular bags will be sold only to the farmers and a slip will be generated. Now once this particular slip is generated, government knows the fertilizer has been purchased by the farmer only. Now the subsidy related to this particular fertilizer will be paid to the producer of the fertilizer. So this is the direct benefit transfer which has been introduced by Government of India in the fertilizer segment. Next, certain points related to food management. In this particular concept of food management, two very important points which have been mentioned are, one, economic cost of food grains and the second one is food subsidy. Let me start with the first one. The economic cost of food grains is a sum total of pooled cost of food grains plus procurement incidentals plus distribution cost. All the three put together will tell you how much is the total expenditure incurred by the government in order to ensure that the rice will be procured from the farmer and finally distributed to the beneficiary, let's say under the public distribution system. But please understand, this particular economic cost of food grains has kept on increasing. For a simple reason, the MSP paid by the government also has increased. So on one side, economic cost of food grains has been increasing in the last couple of years. Second, the concept of a food subsidy. Now imagine a situation, government will procure 1 kg of rice from you. You are a farmer, government will procure 1 kg of rice from you and will pay you MSP of let's say 30 rupees. And there are certain incidentals with respect to this particular procurement such as warehousing, transportation, so on and so forth. That will cost them 5 rupees and the distribution cost is 5 rupees. So the total economic cost of food grains incurred by the government in order to ensure that 1 kg of rice which is procured from you will reach the beneficiary under the public distribution system is 40 rupees. But when this particular rice is given to the beneficiary under NFSA, it will not be sold at 40 rupees, rather it will be sold at a much lower subsidized price, which is referred to as issue price under National Food Security Act. I am taking one example here. Under NFSA, the rice is being sold to the beneficiary at a cost of 3 rupee, wheat is being sold at a cost of 2 rupee, and the coarse grains will be sold at 1 rupee by the government. So look at this. On one side, government incurs a cost of 40 rupees to procure 1 kg of rice, but will collect only 3 rupee when they sell it to a beneficiary in the market. So the food subsidy is nothing but the total economic cost of food grain minus the issue price. In this context, it will be 40 rupees minus 3, that will be 37 rupees. So the food subsidy will be incurred by the government in this particular form. Although food subsidy is a much larger term, I am just giving you a smaller example of how usually the food subsidy bill is calculated. Again, just to remind you, food subsidy is much bigger term. All you need to understand is this is one of the ways or one of the components of the food subsidy. Now understand this, on one side the economic cost of food grains has increased, but the issue price has remained constant. As a result of this, the food subsidy bill that is incurred by the government is much higher or has been increasing over a period of time. This has been discussed under the concept of food management. And finally, economic survey discusses what is a way forward. What has to be done or what measures should be taken into consideration, what steps should be taken in order to ensure that the farmers' incomes are doubled in the coming days. Some of the recommendations that have been provided are 1. Investment in agriculture, water conservation, improved yields through better farming practices, access to market, availability of institutional credit, increasing linkages between agriculture and non-agriculture sectors, etc. should be attended to. Next, as a proportion of a small and marginal farmers is high, there is a need to implement land reforms to free up land markets. As per various agriculture surveys, or to be more precise, as per the recent agriculture survey, the total number of small and marginal farmers in case of India is more than 80%. In simple terms, these are the farmers who are cultivating on a piece of land whose size is less than 2 hectares. Next, coverage of irrigation facilities needs to be improved. Need to support the farmers through direct income or investment support. There is a need to reallocate the surplus labor to other sectors. FCI stocking is above the buffer norms. This has to be revisited. The rates under NFSA and coverage needs to be looked into. These are some of the recommendations that have been provided as a way forward under this particular discussion on agriculture and food management. Now let's have a discussion related to the 8th chapter, which is on industry and infrastructure. Please understand, Government of India has set up a target of taking Indian economy to the level of a $5 trillion economy by 2025. But if this particular target of taking the economy to $5 trillion has to be achieved, these particular two sectors, that is industrial sector as well as infrastructure sector, have to be performing very well. Because please understand, these particular sectors are usually associated with multiplier effects. Now what do you mean by multiplier effect? Usually it means that whenever investment to certain level is done in these particular sectors, this particular investment is going to yield the benefits in certain ways, such as employment generation, promotion of exports, contribution to GVA, contribution to GDP, so on and so forth. This is in simple terms referred as a concept of a multiplier effect. And take for example the infrastructure segment. infrastructure segment is always associated with a multiplier effect. So is $5 trillion by 2025. The government must ensure that the industries as well as the infrastructure segment is taken care. First and foremost, let me start with industries. The various data points have been provided with respect to the performance of industries in the last 1 year. The trends are that the real GVA, gross value addition, for the first half of the current fiscal grew at 1.6% under the industrial segment compared to 8.2% for the same time period in the previous fiscal. That is the first point. In simple terms, the growth in these particular industrial segment was very, very slow. Second, IIP, Index of Industrial Production, during April to November has grown at a rate of 0.6% compared to 5% in the corresponding period in the last fiscal. In fact, in some of these particular months, in the last couple of months itself, the IIP has contracted. That is, IIP rather than increasing has been decelerating, which is not considered to be a very good phenomenon. Third, another very important indicator which is a part of IIP itself, Index of 8 Core Industries, ICI, stood flat this year during April to November compared to a growth rate of 5.1% in the corresponding period in the last fiscal. So you can see that the performance of industries in the current fiscal has not been satisfactory. Forget about satisfactory. There is a concern that one of the reasons for industrial slowdown is because of a poor performance of industries. Various reasons for this particular performance of industries has been: one, the increasing trade tensions in the global market, as a result of which there is uncertainty in the global market. Second, has been the issue of credit availability for various sectors. For example, NBFC in the recent months has come under a lot of stress because of very less credit availability for some of these particular participants. Credit availability generally for industries has been one of the constraints for the growth in these particular industries. There is a slowdown in some of the very important labor intensive sectors such as automobiles, as a result of which the reflection is in the form of a lower IIP, lower industrial growth rate, lower index of 8 core industry growth rate, so on and so forth. So all of these particular factors put together have led to very unsatisfactory growth that has been achieved, or progress that have been achieved at the industrial level. Now, apart from this, what are the points which have been provided in the economic survey for corporate sector? In the corporate sector, the rate of growth in the gross capital formation segment, that is GCF segment, has increased to 7.6% for the financial year 18. Second, gross credit of banking sector to industrial sector has risen by 2.7% in the month of September year on year. And third, Government of India in the last couple of years, especially in the last 1 year, has taken a lot of measures to promote more and more ease of doing business in the domestic market itself. A classic example for this particular concept of promotion of ease of doing business is the introduction of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Although it was introduced a couple of years ago, Government of India has made certain changes to this particular Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The latest one is considered to be a very good reform which has been introduced to make it much more, or to make Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code much more efficient. So as a result of these particular reforms, the performance of Government of India in the ease of doing business report has been improving, especially under resolving insolvency. Out of 10 parameters which are taken into consideration to calculate ease of doing business index, India's performance in 7 of these particular parameters has improved. However, India's performance in 4 of these particular parameters even today is unsatisfactory. For example, starting a business is a problem in case of India. Paying taxes is a problem in case of India. Enforcement of contracts is a problem in case of India. So Government of India needs to have a look into these particular parameters so as to further make it easier to conduct business in the domestic market. Apart from this, Government of India has also tried to introduce the concept of digitalization, has tried to promote rationalization of the labor laws, which are basically promoting the ease of doing business in the domestic market. This has not been mentioned in this particular chapter, but please understand Government of India has reduced the corporate taxes on the businesses. The corporate tax rate has been reduced to 22%, which is considered to be a very good initiative or very important structural reform that has been implemented by the government. Apart from this, even in case of manufacturing companies which will be set up after 1st of the October 2019, the corporate income tax rate has been reduced to 15%, which is considered to be a very good initiative which has been taken by Government of India, which will promote more and more manufacturing in the domestic market, and more jobs would be generated, investment would be generated, there will be a recovery from the slowdown in the domestic market. So these are some of the points related to corporate sector. Next, certain points have been provided with regards to Startup India. Government of India in the year 2015 launched a Startup India, Stand Up India scheme. And following this, in the year 2016, Government of India brought into force 19 action points related to promotion of Startup India. And with regards to startups, usually these particular startups are associated with employment generation, more competition in the market. These will basically disrupt the market and disrupt the status quo in the market, as a result of which the beneficiaries in the system or the stakeholders in the system are expected to benefit. Apart from this, usually the startups are associated with fostering the culture of innovation. Now, to promote this particular idea of a startups or entrepreneurial culture, Government of India launched this particular scheme. Under this particular scheme, large number of reforms or measures have been taken by Government of India. For example, in case of 6 labor laws and 3 environmental laws, Government of India has provided for self-certification. In case of a registration of these particular startups, an app has been launched. In case of patents which are filed by these particular startups, the Government of India has proposed a fast tracking of these particular patents. A fund of funds has been set up by Government of India, which will provide financial assistance to some of these identified startups. Incubators are being promoted to be set up under the concept of a Startup India. Public procurement policy will also be covering the procurement from some of the startups. So these are some of the very important initiatives which have been taken by Government of India to promote the startup culture in India. What has been the situation in case of startups? 1. 27,000 plus startups have been recognized across 551 districts. Second, 55% are from Tier 1 cities, 45% are from Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. 43% of the recognized startups have at least one women director. These are some of the very important points which have been noted in terms of progress in the startups. Now, understand this. Some of you will now have a doubt. What do you mean by a startup? Please understand, Government of India says any company which satisfies 3 conditions will be referred as a startup. First, it should be registered under one of the 3 acts. 1. Companies Act, Limited Liability Partnership Act and Partnership Act. First condition. Second condition, from the date of registration, more than 10 years should not have passed. That is, since the inception, the company should not be older than 10 years. Third, from the date of registration, in none of the succeeding years, the turnover or the sales of the company should have crossed 100 crore rupees. That is, the sales or turnover should be less than 100 crores only. So if a company satisfies all the 3 conditions, government will recognize this particular company as a startup. So if a company satisfies all the 3 conditions, this particular company would be recognized by Government of India as a startup. So these are some of the points related to Startup India. Next, with respect to MSME sector, please understand Government of India has taken a lot of reforms in the last 1 year itself. As such, MSME, that is micro, small and medium enterprises, are very important cog of Indian economy. MSMEs generate huge amount of employment. MSMEs contribute to manufacturing GDP as well as services sector GDP. MSMEs help in bridging the income inequality that exists between urban India and rural India. MSMEs will also contribute in terms of exports from the domestic market to the international market. So MSME sector are very important segment for the Indian economy. And in the last couple of years, MSME sector has been under a lot of stress. And in the last year itself, Government of India has announced a list of 12 key measures to promote growth in this particular sector. Out of all the 12, I've picked up certain important ones. First, Government of India has launched a 59-minute loan portal. Under this particular portal, a preliminary approval of a loan up to 1 crore rupees can be obtained. Again, remember this is just a preliminary approval, not a final approval for the loan. Second, all the companies with a turnover of at least 500 crore rupees should be mandatorily be under the concept of TREDS platform. TREDS stands for Trade Receivables E-Discounting System. This particular system will promote availability of liquidity for the MSME sector. Third one, inter-subvention of 2% has been provided for all the companies, that is MSME units, which are registered under GST on incremental credit up to 1 crore rupees. Fourth one, PPP, Public Procurement Policy, which basically states that certain amount of procurement that is done by public sector enterprises has to be done from micro and small enterprises only. As per this particular policy, 25% of the procurement done by the CPSEs has to be done from micro and small enterprises. Within this, 4% of the procurement has to be done from the MSE units owned by SC/ST entrepreneurs. 3% has to be procured from MSEs owned by women entrepreneurs. So this is the fourth important reform. Fifth, CPSUs to procure through GM only. That is, GM stands for Government E-Marketplace. It's a system which has been designed by Government of India, using which government agencies or government owned enterprises will be procuring their requirement or will be purchasing whatever they require from this particular portal itself. Sixth one, 70% of the cost that is incurred for developing pharma clusters will be borne by the central government itself. So these are some of the very important reforms that have been announced by Government of India in the last 1 year to promote the growth in the MSME sector. Next, related to infrastructure. First, Government of India very recently has proposed a national infrastructure pipeline. Under this particular national infrastructure pipeline, thousands of infrastructure projects have been reported or will be developed. But this particular infrastructure pipeline totally is expected to incur an expenditure or investment to the tune of 102 lakh crore rupees. That is the first point. Second point, this particular investment will be done by central government, state governments as well as the private sector. As per the proposal given by the government, 39% of this investment will come each from the central government as well as from state government, and remaining 22% is expected to come from the private sector. Majority of these particular infrastructure, a substantial amount of investment under these particular infrastructure projects will be coming in the power sector itself. So these are some of the very important points related to NIP. Next, government in the recent times has taken lot of reforms, has implemented lot of measures in the power sector itself, such as promotion of renewable energy, under which Government of India has set up a target of having installed capacity of 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2022. And very recently, the Prime Minister has stated that this particular target will be increased from 175 gigawatts to 450 gigawatts. That is one very important reform. Second, Government of India has implemented scheme, that is Pradhan Mantri Sahaj Bijli Yojana, under which households would be given electricity connection. So the government has implemented these kind of reforms in the power sector. Apart from this, the survey mentions that more than 60% of the total installed capacity in case of electricity comes from the thermal sector itself. And roughly half of the total generation of electricity or the capacity is from the private sector. So these are some of the points related to power sector. Next, in terms of railways, the survey mentions that India has the third largest network of railways, and in the recent times, Government of India has focused more on providing safety in the railway segment. In case of roads, at the end of financial year 18, India had the total length of a road of 59.6 lakh kilometers. Out of this particular 59.6 lakh kilometers, 1.3 lakh kilometers of length of a road network was a national highways. Next, in case of smart cities mission, two very important points have been mentioned. That is, in all the 100 cities which have been identified under the smart cities mission, they have set up special purpose vehicles for the implementation of this particular scheme. And the second very important point, So far, with the launch of this particular scheme, more than 5,000 projects are at various levels of implementation, and the total value of these particular 5,000 plus projects is to the tune of 2 lakh crore rupees. Next, with respect to housing, the points which are given are: first, 31% of total India's population resided in urban India as per 2011 census numbers. And this particular population is going to balloon to more than 60% of the total population by 2030. Apart from this, what is more important is urban centers are the epicenters for economic growth. Majority of the GDP contribution to the Indian economy comes from the urban centers only. Keeping in mind the importance of urban centers, Government of India has launched PMAYU, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban. Under this particular Yojana, the objective of Government of India is to ensure that every household in the urban centers or urban areas will have a Pakka house. And the Government of India wants to achieve this particular objective by 2022. And so far, as per this particular survey, more than 1.03 crore houses have been sanctioned under PMAYU. So these are some of the very important points given with respect to industry and infrastructure. Now let's have a discussion related to 9th chapter of volume 2 of economic survey. This particular chapter is on services sector. Lot of information has been provided in the economic survey which is not relevant for the UPSC exam. Whatever is relevant, we will have a very short discussion related to that particular information in this particular video. First and foremost, service sector has seen a very high growth rate that has been achieved in the last 2 decades. Especially post the LPG reforms, one sector that has been contributing very highly to the GDP has been this particular sector. Even today, to the extent that in some of the states, majority of the contribution in terms of the value addition to the economy is done by the service sector. In terms of generation of employment, service sector is one of the very important areas. In terms of contribution to GDP, service sector is very important. In terms of contribution to the exports basket, the service sector is very, very important. So in this particular context, what has been the performance of the service sector in the last 1 year? Let's have a look at it. First, in terms of value addition, the survey makes a note that the service sector contribution to the GVA, that is a gross value addition, has been very high and it has grown by 6.9% year on year in the year 2019 and 2020. Second very important point, in terms of the contribution to total GVA, service sector accounts for around 55%. Third, credit growth rate to the service sector has slowed down. As per the survey numbers, the credit growth of the banking sector to the service sector for the month of November 2019 was at 4.8% compared to 28.1% a year ago. Next, the performance of the service sector at the state level accounts for over 50% of the gross value addition, and this has been found in case of the 15 states as well as union territories. And in case of 8 states, it accounts for over 60% of the gross state value addition. So these are some of the very important factors to prove that the service sector is very, very important not only at the central government level but even at the state level. Now apart from this, certain points with respect to FDI as well as the trade in service sector have been provided. Let me start with the first one, that is FDI in the services sector. FDI basically stands for foreign direct investment, and one very important sector which has attracted huge amount of FDI in the last 2 decades has been that of the services sector. Post 2000, if you basically break up the inflow of FDI, be it in terms of equity or be it overall FDI, a huge amount of FDI has basically flown into this particular sector itself. Now, the survey makes a note that FDI inflow into the service sector even in the year 2019 and 2020 has increased. This is a good point considering that the FDI inflow for the year 2018 and 2019 has actually declined. As per the survey, till September, that is basically from April 1 to September of 2019, the FDI equity in the services sector has seen a very strong recovery. Not only this, the gross FDI equity inflows have jumped by 33% during this particular period. And the total FDI equity gross inflows, as per the survey, have reached more than $17 billion during this particular period. So there is a recovery in FDI inflow into this particular sector. This particular recovery is a good feature considering the status of Indian economy or the present situation of Indian economy. Because please understand, the Indian economy right now is experiencing a slowdown. One of the ways of overcoming this particular slowdown will be by investing heavily into these particular sectors. Government of India's financials are constrained. Private sector is not willing to invest to a very great extent until unless it sees a certain recovery in the market. And we have already seen that the household savings are very low in the present context. So if you look at all these particular features, right now attracting huge amount of FDI into one of the sectors is a very good feature. And the survey makes a note that there is a huge inflow into the service sector, which has actually declined in the year 2018 and 2019 and has recovered in the year 2019 and 2020. These are some of the very important points given with respect to FDI in the service sector. Apart from this, what has been the trade in the services sector? Because please understand, the FDI contributes heavily into the export basket for India. As per economic survey, services exports account for around 40% of the total export basket. The global IT spending in the year 2020 is expected to increase. However, because of certain external parameters or certain external events, the exports from the service sector are vulnerable or susceptible, such as a Brexit event, such as a valuation of foreign currencies will keep on changing, visa norms which are implemented by other governments such as USA, which is one of the very important market for Indian exports, so on and so forth. So because of these particular changes or volatilities that are taking place in case of the global market, the services market in India is vulnerable to these particular global events. These are some of the very important points discussed under the concept of the trade in the services sector. And finally, there are certain points given with respect to tourism sector. Tourism sector is important in the context of generation of employment, inflow of forex reserves, and contribution to GDP growth rate. India is ranked at a 22nd position in terms of inflow of a tourist in the international market. Very recently, that is 2015 to 2017, the tourism sector experienced a growth rate in case of India. But in the recent times, there has been a certain decline in the growth rate of the tourism sector. And this particular decline in the tourism has not only been experienced by the Indian market, but has been experienced globally also. And since there is a declining growth rate of a tourism, it has also coincided with the inflow of the forex reserves which used to come along with these particular tourists. In order to boost the tourism sector, Government of India in the last couple of years has taken a lot of initiatives or a lot of reforms such as e-tourist visa. So these are some of the very important points given with respect to chapter 9 on services sector in the economic survey. Now let's have a discussion related to the 10th chapter of Economic Survey Volume 2, titled Social Infrastructure, Employment and Human Development. Government of India in the 11th 5-year plan as well as the 12th 5-year plan has put in the central theme of achieving inclusive growth. That is, we not only want to achieve higher GDP growth rate, we want to ensure this growth is sustainable. We want to ensure there is also development achieved in the Indian society. In order to achieve all these particular objectives, Government of India needs to ensure that social infrastructure development is taking place. That is basically the infrastructure such as school infrastructure, sanitation infrastructure, rural roads, hospitals, etc. will be developed. And in order to ensure all of this, there is a need to have a higher expenditure not only at the central level but also at the state level. Because please remember this, central government no doubt is one of the very important spender in the market. However, the total expenditure of the states is much higher than that of the center. So in this particular regard, what has been the expenditure of both the central government as well as the state government under the concept of social expenditure? That is basically expenditure in terms of education, healthcare, so on and so forth. The survey says that the overall expenditure, that is basically at the central as well as the state level, in social services such as education, healthcare, etc., has increased from 6.2% to 7.7% of GDP between the time period of 2014-15 to 2019 and 20. That is basically financial year 15 to financial year 20. This is considered to be a good improvement. Second, this particular increase in the expenditure was seen to be happening across all the sectors during this particular period. That is, the expenditure was not concentrated in one or two sectors. The expenditure has increased across all these particular sectors. Second, in education, it has increased from 2.8% to 3.1% of GDP. And in case of healthcare, it has increased from 1.2% to 1.6% of GDP. Apart from this, the share of the expenditure, that is social expenditure, out of the total budget has increased from 23.4% in the financial year 15 to 26% by the financial year 20. Now, apart from this, the survey makes certain points related to human development. That is, in case of a Human Development Index, which is an annual publication, India's performance in terms of ranking has improved. India was ranked at 130th in the year 2017, and it has improved by one place to reach 129th in the report for the year 2018. Now, apart from this, certain very important points have been provided with respect to education. First of all, within the concept of SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, there is a goal related to education. That is, SDG 4 basically states that there is a need to promote equitable quality learning and provide lifelong learning opportunities for all by the year 2013. And in order to ensure that the quality of education will increase, the accessibility to education will increase, Government of India has implemented Right to Education in the year 2009, under which Government of India wants to provide education for the children between 6 to 14 years. Another concept of a right to education, certain very important provisions are: 1. There shall be one learning classroom for every teacher. There shall be separate toilets for the girl students as well as the boys students. There shall be a separate playground for these particular children. There shall be all-weather building for elementary education. There shall be one room which is used as an office room, come head teacher's room, come storeroom, etc. Now, with implementation of these particular right to education, there has been certain improvement that has been observed in the education levels. As per Unified District Information System for Education, certain findings have been provided in the economic survey, and these particular findings are: 98.38% of the government elementary schools have a girls toilet, 96.23% of the government elementary schools have boys toilets, 97.13% of the government elementary schools have a provisional drinking water facility, 38.62% of the government elementary schools have ramps, 58.88% of government elementary schools have a boundary wall, 56.72% of government elementary schools have playground facility, 79.23% of government elementary schools have library, 61.75% of schools have electricity connection. So these are some of the findings given in economic survey as per UDISC. Now, apart from this, there is a discussion related to skill development. As per various surveys, it has been found that a large proportion of labor in case of India doesn't get access to skills. And please understand, accessibility to skill is very important in order to ensure that this particular labor is absorbed in the labor market. As per census of 2011, more than 76 crore people fall in the working age group in case of India. And as per various surveys, that is, if I want to quote a Niti Aayog report itself, only around 5% of the labor in case of India is actually skilled. This has been discussed in the economic survey. As per Periodic Labor Force Survey, which is a very important survey which is published annually now, this has replaced the earlier EUS, Employment Unemployment Surveys, which used to be conducted once every 5 years. As per this particular survey, only around 13.53% of the workforce has actually received training, out of which 2.26% are from formal and 11.27% are from informal sector. Now, in order to promote the idea of skilling, Government of India has implemented a lot of reforms in the last couple of years. For example, Government of India has launched a Skill India initiative or Skill India program. Government of India also has launched a Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, under which the survey makes a note that 69 lakh people have been trained or skilled. Apart from this, the survey also makes a note of the Government of India's amendment to Apprentices Rules of 1992. Under this, some of the very important changes that have been introduced are: 1. Government of India has increased the limit of engaging apprentices. That is, earlier 10% of the labor was in the form of apprentices in a company. Now this has been increased to 15%. Second very important change, the payment of a stipend under the apprentices has been fixed for the first year. Earlier, this was linked to the wages. Now this has been fixed. Third very important change, the size limit of establishment which are supposed to hire apprentices has been reduced from 40 employees to 30 employees. So these are some of the very important changes or reforms which have been introduced by Government of India in order to promote the idea of a skill development. Next, with respect to employment, as per PLFS, that is a Periodic Labor Force Survey, regular or salaried employees has increased by 5 percentage points, that is from 18% in the year 11 and 12 to 23% in the year 2017 and 2018. The proportion of women workers in regular or salaried employees category also has increased from 13% to 21% during the same period, that is from financial year 12 to financial year 18. This is considered to be an improvement in terms of a generation of full salaried or regular employment as well as women workers. Apart from this, the survey also makes a note that female labor force participation rate has declined from 33.1% to 25.3% between financial year 12 to financial year 18. Now, first and foremost, what is LFPR, labor force participation rate? Out of the total population, how much population falls in the labor force is basically called as labor force participation rate. I'll repeat the statement. If I simply pick up 100 people randomly, out of these particular 100 people, how many people are falling into labor force? That is, who are working as well as who are searching for the jobs. This particular ratio is called as labor force participation rate. And the female labor force participation rate has a decline from 33.1% in the financial year 12 to 25% by financial year 18. And what are the reasons why there is a decline? This particular decline has been observed because 1. Rural wages have found to be increasing, and when the rural wages increase, it has been found that the female will withdraw themselves from the labor force market. Second, there are certain constraints in the Indian society which basically put restrictions on these kind of working women. As a result of this, these particular women withdraw themselves from the labor market. Third, some of this particular labor also has decreased because women are increasingly shifting from working to studying or pursuing higher education. As a result of this, these particular women withdraw themselves from the labor force market. And fourth very important reason is that these kind of women do not find suitable jobs or those kind of jobs which they want are not available in the market. All these are some of the reasons why there is a decline in the labor force participation rate. And finally, it is also mentioned that female worker population ratio stood at 23.8%, was 25.5% in case of a rural area and 19.8% in case of urban areas for the financial year 18. And in the year 11 and 12, this was 32.2%. The worker population ratio basically refers to a ratio wherein the total population which is working is divided by the total population of the society. So these are some of the very important points from this particular chapter on social infrastructure, employment and human development.